Well, the interim report from the Royal Commission into Aged Care has now been released, finding institutions were often unkind and uncaring, failing to meet the needs of elderly people. Ian Henschke, Chief Advocate from National Seniors Australia, he joins us live now from our Adelaide studio. Thanks for your company this morning, Ian.
Good morning, Charlotte. Yes, you're right. Indeed, the Royal Commission has found, and the exact quote is, that it doesn't meet the quality of care that the community expects. Now, this was a very interesting finding because Scott Morrison, when he announced the Royal Commission, said it was to restore faith in the aged care system. In fact, it's almost done the opposite. So
what were your overall, reaction to this interim report?
Well, the interim report was the work of Richard Tracy, who was the Commissioner who sadly died just before the report was published, and it's his legacy. And those words, cruel and unkind, are the words that he's used. In fact, National Seniors was there on day one when we talked about the need for more home care, and we don't want to get distracted by the fact that there's been a lot of focus on residential care. The home care is the area where there is a very great need, and there are 120,000 people waiting for a home care package, and 16,000 people died last year. Now, the Royal Commission investigated that area forensically at the beginning of the Royal Commission, and much of the work of this interim report is about the failure of home care. It's a failure because the government hasn't provided the money that's needed for the people that need care in their homes to get the care they need. There are problems, obviously, with the delivery of that care as well, because there's a wide range of hours that people get for the same amount of money. So there's some issues to do with transparency, value for money, etc. But in broad terms, home care was one of the key areas that was in this section of the Royal Commission. It's something that National Seniors has been calling for, because you really need to provide packages for the people that need that, and a lot of them are being cared for by family and friends, and the home care package doesn't give you 24-hour care. The home care package gives you a couple of hours of care a day. In some cases, with a high-level package, you might be lucky enough to get sort of 15 to 20 hours of care at the top end. So you're really only talking a couple of hours a day, but that can make the difference between having someone stay in their home or move into a home. And this is why we were very pleased yesterday when the Prime Minister said, probably under a bit of pressure in an interview, he said, we will provide some money. Now, the question is, will it be enough money? Because the Royal Commissioner, when this was raised, said to Ms Buffington from the department, can you put a figure on it? And it was very interesting watching this, because it was clear that Richard Tracy was concerned about getting them to come into the real world. In fact, he used that phrase at one stage. He said, we're talking about the real world here, so how much money does it actually cost to fix the problem? Now, that is going to be his legacy. And Miss Buffington said $2 to $2.5 billion. So this requires real money to fix a real problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think home care is often something that the general public doesn't think about too much when it comes to aged care. Ian, the overriding theme of this interim report was a shocking tale of neglect for elderly people who aren't yet in the aged care system but are probably going to be transitioning into that in the next few years. How terrifying of a prospect is that for them to think that inevitably I'm going to end up in this system that is absolutely awful?
Well, this is where it comes back to the way we've structured the system in Australia. We've got a very odd system here, because if you look around the world, in the OECD countries, only Portugal has a higher level of residential care compared to home care. At the other end, Israel has virtually a very small amount of residential care and a very high level of home care. So I think that what we've got to recognise is that when you go into residential care, it's at the very end of your life, and so therefore it's almost like a hospice, and we shouldn't be putting people into residential care who can be looked after in their homes. And I think that's what most people want. When we do surveys at National Seniors, you won't be surprised to hear that people say, I want to stay in my home, not go into a home. And I think that's a message coming out very loud and clear. And this is why I think we've got to put better care and nursing into the frail end of life, and more money and more care into home care. And that's the message that's coming through. It's a simple message. It needs money, and we need the government to do something about it. They called a Royal Commission to restore faith in aged care. Put your money where your mouth is and restore that faith.
Yeah, make those changes. It is easy to point the finger at the staff here because in many of the cases that have been receiving media attention, there's been a lack of responsibility in some of these cases.
Yes.
And the report has found that staff were often underpaid, undervalued and insufficiently trained. Now, would staff be another good area to focus on after this commission?
Oh, look, one of the basic things, I mean, Professor John McCallum has provided evidence on behalf of our organisation, and he's an expert in ageing. And, of course, one of the things that we've noted is that there is no compulsory dementia training for people working in aged care. And Dementia Australia will tell you that more than 50% of people in aged care have got dementia. A recent study found another quarter have got undiagnosed dementia. We've also had studies showing that most people in aged care have got some form of depression. So you're looking at people that need to have that specialised training. And if you're paying someone $21 as a carer, at least what we should be doing, at the very least, is ensuring that those people understand the people that they're working with, and that requires training. I know one person who says that the way that we should restructure the training is to have on-the-job training and classroom training, and this idea of being able to get trained online, doing a course that has no dementia training in it, and then you wouldn't be surprised to see that some of these people are losing patients because they don't understand the patients, if you want to put it that way.
I think that's something we'll really struggle with as a society for the next few years, all of this online training and online university degrees.
Yes.
There are simply some things that can't be taught online that you actually need to be there in person for.
And you need to be alongside that person and watch them. I mean, I trained as a teacher many years ago, and I wasn't allowed to go into a classroom without someone watching me. They used to have supervisory teachers, and you would go in and someone would look at your lesson plan, they'd watch how you performed, they would talk to you about how you spoke to the students. I mean, that's the way things were done. It's almost like getting back to that apprenticeship system. We need to have people supervised in aged care up to the point where we know that they're doing a good job, and we know they've got the academic understanding of the problems, and these carers can do great jobs, and many of them do, but that's almost by accident, not by design. We've got to design the system so that we have better training, and we've got to have more care in aged care as a result.
Ian, just finally, I'll get you on one more thing. This final report, of course, this is just the interim report. The final one will be handed down in November next year. What do you expect that we will find in this? Do you think that it will be worse than the public expected?
Well, I think you've already seen the shape of things to come in this report. And as I said, this is the legacy of Richard Tracy, who worked on this report right up until the very last days of his life. And that's why I believe that this report is so important, because he was a man who worked in the army all his life, and then he went and took this role on, and he was deeply committed to it. And the title of this report is Neglect. And I will remind you that the definition of elder abuse is abuse and neglect. Now, this is institutionalised elder abuse, the way that we've got the system set up at the moment. And I know there are people out there that will say, look, there's good care happening, but we have to have a system where we can feel safe when someone goes into it. We now have to have a system that's better. And Australia wants to be the best at sport. Why can't we be the best at aged care? I mean, because I tell you what, every second voter in Australia is now over 50, so there's a political reason to get it right. And 1,000 people turn 80 every week in Australia. Think about that number. I mean, this is about you and me. It's about your family. It's something you can't just push out of sight, out of mind. So Scott Morrison, when he said he's going to do something about it, we're going to hold him to it.
All right, well, we'll see what happens next year when that final report's handed down, but hopefully we'll start to see a few more changes before then. Thanks for your time this morning.
They don't have to wait until next year. They can do it now, and that's what we're calling on. Thank you.
Exactly right. Thank you. Ian Henschke from National Seniors Australia.